You cannot identify fair value gap and liquidity void, or you cannot differentiate them, then this video is for you. Worse, if you cannot even identify any of them, or you don't even know what any of them mean, then you need to watch this video till the end. Hey guys, this is Synthetic Goddess. If you're new to this channel, on this channel, I teach strategies on how you can trade synthetic indices even if you are a beginner. So if this sounds like something that excites you, then you should click on the subscribe button. Also check the description to join our Telegram channel for more information about synthetic indices and synthetic indices signals. So let's get straight into what we want to talk about: fair value gap and liquidity void. The first thing we want to know is what exactly is fair value gap and what exactly is liquidity void. Now, when we talk about fair value gap, it is commonly referred to as FVG. Okay, you might have heard people say FVG, FVG. Now, this is where you would know what FVG mean. Now, fair value gap is just like a price imbalance created when price moves impulsively in a particular direction, now leaving a gap in between it. Now, do not get confused. I am going to show you what exactly this means. Now, let me show you in graphical representation before I show you on chart so that you can understand everything I am saying perfectly. Now, we can have something like this. Remember, I said it is created in 3 candles. Yes, you can identify fair value gap in 3 candles. It is commonly recognized in 3 candles. Now, we can have something like this. This is the second candle. Then the third candle can create something like this. You can see that based on this particular movement, we are moving impulsively to the downside. And you can see the market is trending to the downside. It is creating good candle to the downside. Now, the first thing you want to recognize is where are the areas where market is moving impulsively to the downside, and where is the possible area where market can create a gap. Now, you can see that this is 1, 2, 3 candles. Now, this is the end of the first candle. We mark it out. You mark out the end of the first candle, then the beginning of the third candle, you mark it out, whether it is with a wick or with a body. Okay, so you mark it out. So we have something like this. Now, from here to here is what we call gap. Yes, that is where the gap lies. That is where we have the gap. That is what we call gap, and that is what we call fair value gap. Now, the reason there is fair value gap, or the purpose for fair value gap, is that it is like a magnet to price. It is like a magnet of price. That is, market comes back easily to those points just to fill it up. And it is very easy for you to recognize point of interest that has fair value gap. It is very easy for markets to use a point of interest with a fair value gap than using a point of interest without fair value gap. Now, fair value gap allows you recognize the point of interest that has not been tested or that has not been properly filled. Don't worry, just take it slowly. And if you need to rewatch this video for you to understand, just watch it. I don't want you to get confused. I don't want you to, fix your head with so many information. I just need you to get exactly what I am saying. So we have from this high, from this area to this area is what we call our gap. There is a slight gap in between those 3 candles. That is what we call fair value gap. Now, let's see what it looks like on chart, how to recognize them. So this is volatility 25 and this is 24 hours time frame. If you don't know what volatility indices is, you can check some of my videos. I explained what exactly volatility indices is. And if you want to trade 247 on volatility indices, check the description and get registered on the reef. So you can see that we had this impulse to the downside. It is very, very obvious that there was an impulse to the downside here. So where do we recognize our fair value gap? This is the candle that made the most move to the downside. So that is the area it is possible for us to recognize our fair value gap. So this is number one candle, this is the second candle, and this is the third candle. But I'm not going to be using this third candle. I'm going to be using this wick, because you can see that that wick is higher than that third candle. Those wicks are higher than this third candle. So I'm going to be using those wicks. So I would mark out this first. I'll mark this. That's the number one candle. So this is the third candle I'm going to be marking. So from here to this high is what we call a gap, and that is what we tag as fair value gap. Okay, now let's see something like that here again for the buy aspect. You can see that we had this impulse to the upside. We had this movement to the upside. It was really impulsive. Now we are going to be marking out 3 candles. So we have number 1 candle, number 2 candle, then number 3 candle. So we have this. So this is a high. This is our candle. And this is the third candle we are marking out. So from this low to this high is where we tag as a gap, and that is what we call fair value gap. Now, if you are buying, this area is going to be suitable for you to mark out your point of interest. So let's take, for instance, I want to mark out here as my point of interest. You can see that it is very easy for me to mark out this area as a point of interest. Why? Because I have another confluence, which is the fair value gap, assuring me that that particular point of interest has not been tested. Now, fair value gap does not work on its own. Please take notes. I don't want you to get confused. Fair value gap is not independent. It is dependent on other factors. It is dependent on other concepts, okay? So you must not trade fair value gap alone. If not, you are going to get confused and you are going to get caught up in the losses of the market. Okay, now let's move to the second one, which is liquidity void. What exactly is liquidity void? Now, liquidity void is just when market makes an impulse displacement, either to the upside or to the downside. There's this impulse movement, like there's a lot of candles being created in a particular direction. Let's put it that way. There is a lot of candles created in a particular direction, telling you that market is crazily moving in a particular direction. That is, market is just moving impulsively in a particular direction. It is giving you that movement. Now, in most cases, this movement does not create anything we call liquidity. It just moves impulsively. It just moves impulsively in a particular direction. That is what we call liquidity void. Now, what is the purpose of liquidity void? The reason for liquidity void is that most times markets will come back to give us a retracement to fill up that void. Okay, now the reason for it is because we have a lot of buyers or sellers at that particular moment. At that particular point, we had a lot of buyers, we had a lot of sellers in whatever the movement is. If it is to the upside, it simply means that we had a lot of buyers at that particular moment. And if it is to the downside, it means we had a lot of sellers at that particular moment. So what you are expecting from the market is just for market to come back and give you a retracement to fill up that void. That is, if we had that movement to the upside, what you are expecting is that sellers should come back and fill some of those void. Now, it might not fill everything, okay? It might just fill some point. And remember, I said this concept cannot be traded alone. It is dependent on other concepts. It is dependent on the structure of the market, dependent on the liquidity, dependent on POI. In fact, it is dependent on a lot of things, but you need to have the knowledge so that when you see it in the market, you know that this is exactly what I am looking out for. So what we are expecting from liquidity void is that we are expecting market to revisit that area, okay? we're expecting it to be filled again or to rebalance it. So we had this impulse to the upside. Can you see that there was no single black candle created here? This is telling you that we had a whole lot of buyers in the market at that particular point, or we had a whole lot of smart people buying at that particular moment, or we had a whole lot of big guys in the market at that particular moment for the buy setup. You can see how impulsively we moved. There was no single black candle created. Can you see why it is different from fair value gap? If I want to mark out fair value gap, I will just mark out this high. I'll mark out this high and I'll mark out this low. I'll mark out this low. This is my fair value gap, right? Now, this is liquidity void. We had that crazy impulse to the upside. There was a whole lot of impulse to the upside by the buyers, and it was created in different candles. So this is a void, and we're expecting the market would come back to revisit the order, either to fill it up or to rebalance it. Sellers will come back to rebalance that movement of the buyers. Okay, that is what we call liquidity void. Now you might be wondering, what is now the difference between liquidity void and fair value gap? Now, number one, liquidity void can be series of candles. It is a price move, in fact, an impulsive price movement without retracement. That is, at that particular moment, market was not doing any retracement. While fair value gap can often be seen in 3-candle imbalance, just 3 candles, okay? And also, we always use fair value gap for entry. We often use fair value gap for entry, while liquidity void is always used to notice where market is coming back to rebalance, or where market is coming back to revisit or to fill again. That is what we use liquidity void for. And those are the significant difference between fair value gap and liquidity void. Now, how do you use fair value gap in the market? Now, when you want to mark out your point of interest, just remember I said this concept cannot stand on its own. If I want to mark out my point of interest, I am going to check if there is a fair value gap. Before I make any entry, I'll check if there is a fair value gap that is supporting that particular point of interest. Why am I looking at that? It is because I want to see if market has not tested that area before a movement to the upside. So for instance, if I want to mark out this candle, okay, this is an impulsive move to the upside, right? So we had a change of character here. This was where we had a change of character. We've not taken this eye, which is the external. So if I want to mark out my point of interest, this is where I'm going to mark out. I'm going to mark out this. I'll mark out this as my point of interest, no doubt. Now, I would want to confirm if market moved impulsively, leaving a gap away from that point of interest. And as you can see, we had that happen. So this is it. And this. So there is a gap, there is market gap at that particular moment. So it is giving me more confidence, and it is giving me more confluence that this point of interest is a good area of point of interest. I'm going to see you guys in the next video. This is going to be all for this video. I'm going to re-explain in more videos, so do not forget to subscribe on this channel. So this is going to be all, guys. Have an amazing trading day ahead. Bye, guys.